Most businesses aren't struggling with artificial intelligence because they chose the wrong tool. They're struggling because nobody taught their people how to think alongside it. And I built and run the AI readiness diagnostic in a few organizations now over the last 6 months. And I see the same pattern emerging. The same pattern keeps surfacing. That we've got this attitude and behavior, rather just this attitude towards AI that sits at roughly 80% or 81% to be exact. But our behaviors do not match that attitude. Neither does the knowledge that we have about how the inner workings of AI and generative AI in particular. What do the inner workings look like? We have a very, very low level of understanding as far as what that looks like. So the constraint is not budget. The constraint is not infrastructure or our security mechanisms. The constraint is literacy. And on the ground, it looks like this. We've got a team, our team has a license, and we use it for easy wins. And then quietly we drift back into the way things are because our processes haven't changed. Our daily routines at work haven't changed. So adoption stalls at the novelty that I've got some new toy, new shiny object, a new piece of technology that I used to work with. But very few people will actually acknowledge that and say it out loud, that the novelty wears off. Next week, I'm going to take you through exactly how AI readiness predicts success. And we're going to show you through the Catalyst Collective, we're going to show you what literacy looks like. We're going to break that down, unearth the data, and we're going to help you move your team from a state of curiosity to a point of capability. So registration link below, bring a colleague, pass this link on, share it with someone in your network that you know is dealing with this exact same challenge and problem. I'm looking forward to it next week. Look out for the link. Cheers. Bye.
Yeah. Morning, Terry. Nice to have you with us. Hello, Brian. Nice to have you with us.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Terry.
Morning.
Okay, so I think we should kick off. Okay, are you ready, Devon?
Yeah, I am ready. Let me share my screen. I've got a few things going on here. Yeah. Oops. Great stuff. Okay.
I think everybody's familiar with what the mid-month spark is. It's really saying here are things that you can do and use. It's more than just an inspiration session where we're all trying to figure out the language for AI and where we're going with AI. It's more about here are really useful things that we've uncovered and discovered and are busy with that might be of use to you in your field in using AI. So, right, Devon, over to you.
Linda, thank you so much and welcome to everybody, especially if it's your first time here today with us. We're really excited to have you with us. When we were chatting about the mid-month spark for the month of August, I thought, there's so much of conversation that is taking place in the market where people are discussing how much of their budget do they send towards, or their training budget do they, dispel or expense towards AI education and so forth. And what I've seen in the market is, the budget just gets spent. We see very little ROI associated to the budget that has been spent. And that led me over the last, I would say the last 4 months, where I spent quite a significant amount of my time building a diagnostic. Apologies for the typo there. I think I deleted the words center. Oh no, ignore that. So over the last 4 months, I've sort of built what's called the diagnostic on AI readiness to follow an evidence-led approach to what adoption really looks like. Right? So I've got an assessment. I've got a short poll that I also want to send into the chat in a few minutes. But this essentially is the framing that I want to put forward today. That the conversation we're going to have today is not about me telling you which large language model you should be using. Neither is anybody on the call going to sort of talk about what large language model we should be paying for, because I think I got off a phone call yesterday as well where someone asked me, should we be paying for Copilot for Business, or should we be paying for Claude? And I think the question that needs to be answered is one that comes before we even get to the point where we start debating, should we be paying for a large language model license in our organizations? Instead, we should be looking at how are we actually using the applications? How are we actually using what we currently have access to? And how much time do we actually spend using a large language model for work-related tasks, so that when we end up paying for the license, when we end up paying for a large language model, especially if it's a subscription model or something that's embedded across our workflow, that we know exactly where in that workflow it's going to be playing an active role on a regular basis to ensure that we really eke out that productivity, right? So I've got 3 questions that I want to ask you. I'm going to drop this link into the chat. And I'd like you to, it's 3 questions, all right? If you can, there we are. And for those of us that want to use an image, Charles, did you give me access to pasting images into the chat? No.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, okay, it's taking a bit longer, but either way, the URL's there, right? So the first question is, AI will meaningfully change my role within how my role works within the next 12 months. And it's on a Likert scale, so strongly disagree all the way through to agree. If you can fill that out. The second question is, in the past week, how often did you use an AI tool on a real work task? Right? Oftentimes what I see people doing when it comes to work-related activities, it's summarizing an email, summarizing or triaging your inbox, or it's summarizing a document, compiling a document, building a presentation. And one of the big challenges regarding building presentations is that you build the presentation, it doesn't look right, so then you chuck it away and you start building from scratch, right? I've seen that happen all far too much. But it's a smarter way to do that. And I'll show you how best we can. And then lastly, it's a true or false question, right? An AI system connected to your workplace can access any document held within your organization. So I'd like you to take some time just to fill that out. I'm going to have a look and see what the responses look like. I've got a bit of a frog in my throat this morning. Okay. Yeah, so thank you for filling it out. So we've got, for question number 1, we've got quite a large group. 63% of the group here today believe that AI will significantly, more meaningfully rather, change my role within the next 12 months. We've got one person that's saying that it's not going to change my role. So there's a strongly disagree there. But it's at 88% of the group feel that there's going to be meaningful change within the next 12 months in my role. So arguably there's a high attitude towards AI's influence at work. For the second question, we've got 88% of the group use it on a daily basis. Okay. I think the group is largely skewed because we've got 4 people in the room that are that use it on a daily basis. That are the founding members of the Catalyst Collective as well. But largely, we've got 88% still, right? And then lastly, the third question is we've got 63% of the room that say that large language models can access, when AI assistant or agent can access workplace data, simply by it being available in my workplace, embedded across, for instance, Microsoft tenant. We've got 63% of individuals believing that it's not got access to any document held across my organization. We've got 38% of the group saying that it can, right? And that's 38% of us have a false positive expectation here. And this is the problem that I'm seeing and that I've uncovered with the diagnostic. Right. So we've got I'll come back to those results in a few minutes. The problem is that we buy licenses, we run a generic assessment, a generic awareness session, and then we expect people. We send out an email and we mention, we've got AI, we've got Copilot, we've got Claude, we've got ChatGPT, we're paying for it. You got your license. Make sure we use it so that we increase productivity and efficiency. What IT then does is they check a usage dashboard based on the people that have access to it. Are they using it? Are they logging in once a week? Yes, they are. And then we can conclude that adoption is happening because number of logins are up, right? And this is how we misdiagnose why we think that adoption is taking place. Because we think that, and amongst us today, we see that 88% of us have a high attitude towards AI. So there's a lot of enthusiasm towards AI. So we train people, right? But at the attitude dimension alone is not going to help us build literacy. We've got once again a large group in this call today, but also I'm seeing in the data of the clients that I've been working with, the clients that have completed the diagnostic. You think that there's largely about just over 50% of the population that have completed the diagnostic have 50% of them are using it once or twice a week. So we see logins, but the problem is that we don't know how to judge. We don't know how to judge the output. We don't know how to build a mental capacity around verifying the output, because we believe that AIs or large language models are searching, which is false. Large language models do not search for information in the same way that you have a Google search engine. Instead, large language models, what they do from a technical perspective, they predict a pattern, and therefore they retrieve information based on a knowledge base, based on your data, based on data that is available on the web. If you've given it access to search the web, it computes that information, predicts what the next logical word should be, and then it surfaces that information to you. And we don't know how to judge it effectively because it looks right? Our brain actually tells us that looks right, therefore it has to be right. So we need to build that judgment layer. And that's where I'm seeing an even further drop off from a cognitive layer or cognition level. So just because you've attended training, it doesn't mean that you are literate. If that was the case, we would have everybody here on the call that has attended a leadership program, that has a leadership certificate, is a leader. And I think we've got a few leadership development specialists on the call here that will say that, yeah, Devon, I've seen that plenty of times, right? You attend a leadership training event and, now you the best thing since sliced bread when it comes to being a leader, but that's not true, right? There's a continuous level of awareness around your own leadership behavior that you need to hone on a regular basis. And the same is true when it comes to AI literacy or AI development or capability development. As far as AI, it's the belief in us knowing how to use AI and understanding AI really move together. And therefore, it's important that we understand that there, right? So what I've done, if we dive into the assessment very quickly, or the diagnostic rather, is I've triangulated 3 levels: attitudes, our belief, trust, and openness; behaviors, applied, consistent use; inside real workflows. And then lastly, cognition, it's understanding the technical elements around what a large language model actually is and how it surfaces the information after you've given it the prompt. There are 21 questions that are highly bespoke, scored out of 58. The learners or the participants receive a self-individual report as well as a group report. There are scenario-based questions embedded in the assessment so that we combat the overconfidence bias in self-reported assessments. So there's some negative scoring and so forth. It takes under 15 minutes to complete, and any seniority is applicable to complete it. So these are actual numbers that you're seeing here from here on out. The important thing is not that we have 40 out of 58 as an average for a particular target group, right? The important thing is that we move from assessing through to scoring that assessment to what does the number 40 out of 58 now actually mean in the way we develop capability, and then how do we remeasure after we've attended the development activities, right? So if I look at if we read a report, and this is from a financial services organization, we've got 9 individuals sitting in this developing domain or developing tier, 6 individuals sitting in the proficient tier, and then 1 sitting in a strategic tier. We've got 0 individuals in emerging. 16 people completed the assessment, and the level of seniority was all the way from coordinator through to a C-suite individual. This group had an 83% correlation towards the attitude, so there was high belief, very similar to those of us that have completed those 3 questions this morning. However, there's a 31% or 31-point drop-off when it comes to the behaviors, right? So we had people that have never used AI before at work for work-related tasks. We had people that use it once a day, once a week, once a month. And while we had a large percentage of the group believe that AI had an opportunity to influence their work processes, we had some of those individuals that have that high level of belief that have never used, for instance, Copilot at work, have never used Claude at work, even though they had the subscription. And that's why that purchasing the subscription upfront and running an awareness session, that doesn't work. It leads to 0 level of adoption, or very low levels of application, right? So that was a genuine inflection point for us. They displayed a very strong verification habit. So whenever those individuals that use AI at work, in this case it was Copilot, whenever they used Copilot, they did display a very strong verification habit, which is that judgment, right? How should I be using this output? Especially when facing a client, especially when facing colleagues, especially when facing the board in the case of a C-suite member. So we built on that in the education that resulted from this report. We overcame this data access myth, where everybody now understands who should have access to what type of data within their business, based on the various occupational levels, based on the sensitivity of the data. And we closed this 26% gap, right? For 26% of the group of those 16 people have attended formal education regarding AI. So this was essentially for 74% of the group. It was the first time they were embedding themselves in an AI education activity. I'm going to skip through that one because they all got that right. And I really want to spend a little bit of time just talking about the findings, because this is where literacy is developed. So on the left-hand side of the screen, we've got what the data said So what the diagnostic outputs pointed out is that we've got people that are sitting across multiple different levels, emerging, developing, proficient, and strategic. We've got this high attitude towards AI, but a relatively low attitude, low behavior, low application, low embedding in the workflow as far as how people are using Copilot at work. Very little individuals, 26% of those participants have attended any formal education. There's shared misconceptions around how AI is actually working. So very little technical understanding as far as how the large language model works. We had no executive member in the top tier around using AI at work, right? So while these executives had shared, and I've got permission from this client to share this information with you, while these executives had shared with their business that you must use AI at work, I think if the right word is probably something around hypocrisy of them sharing that, is that none of them have actually used AI for work tasks. So that was something that we had to overcome. And lastly, they named real use cases. And those use cases led to what's on the right-hand side of the screen, 2 tracks, right? 2 development-oriented capability building workshops, nothing generic, because we brought those real use cases into the workshop where individuals started to build AI agents. They started to understand exactly how to build a gold standard prompting framework, how to create a skill for Copilot that they could use on a regular basis. So they've trained Copilot to function in a very personalized manner, and therefore they did not now need to build a very lengthy prompt each time they needed to leverage the large language model for any work-related activity. So a very bespoke 2-track designed workshop. What stems from that is some expansion activities, which are coaching. So it's not awareness-related activities anymore. We now have coaching activities that are now being embedded across the life of this business. An AI competency model is currently being developed. Right? So we understand now that across the multiple different organizational levels, there are certain skills that the coordinators need to embody in order to be in order to leverage Copilot at work effectively. For a middle manager, there are certain skills. For a senior manager, an executive, senior manager and executive rather, there are additional skills that are required. And therefore, from a novice, intermediate, proficient, and expert level, a competency model is being developed to ensure that Copilot at work is leveraged effectively. We've written an AI policy that the key stakeholders, not just at an exco level, but at a middle management level, at a coordinator level, people that are using AI on a regular basis. The AI policy is signed off by everybody that's using the large language model at work, because if the coordinator doesn't know exactly how the output is going to be used, we could tarnish change management, right? In the same way that if the middle manager does not know how to use the AI output to go alongside the management of performance, how do we build accountability across an organization? And therefore, it's important that the middle manager understands exactly what's going into the AI policy, and then in a very collaborative manner, partner with the human capital stakeholders, partner with the executive stakeholders, as well as with the IT stakeholders, to ensure that the permissions, to ensure that accountability, and ensure that the people management responsibilities are all built into the AI policy as well. Because a tool is not accountable, the people are accountable, and that's something that we built about quite importantly there. Then executive coaching for Exco. that was framed strategically rather than operationally. And then I think the last point here around what it triggered, the workshops, what they triggered, and what the outcome of diagnostic triggered was that each team, and if I go to the next slide, each team across marketing, legal, finance, human capital, sales, and then as well relationship management, there are ring-fenced process engineering workshops or design workshops that are now in play to understand exactly what work looks like. Because if we want to get to the transfer, if we want to ensure that AI transforms our workplace, if we want to ensure that we are able to delegate tasks to AI in order to make certain decisions within our business for us, and we act as a review layer or a detection layer that sits on top of the decision that needs to be made, how do we know where along the process of work, along our workflow, how do we know, do we actually know what that looks like? Do we know what that process looks like? So you can't automate a process that nobody has articulated. You cannot automate a workflow. You can't embed AI in your workflow if you don't know what that workflow looks like. So the activities that each work stream that you saw on the previous slide, from marketing all the way through to sales, each workflow looks at where does AI assist me? What's repeatable in that workflow that AI can automate? What can I delegate to AI? And are you seeing where the AI policy becomes extremely important? What can I delegate towards AI to make decisions for me? And how is accountability then managed in that delegation? And lastly, we ultimately, once we establish all of these checkpoints and all these gateways, we ultimately get to a place where we're able to embark on that digital transformation, empowered by artificial intelligence. And you can't skip any one of these steps. You have to go through each of these steps in order to ensure that you know exactly where along your workflow AI is playing an assistant role, where AI is playing an automation role for high volume, repeatable activities, where AI is playing a delegation responsibility from an agentic AI perspective, and ultimately getting to the point where we really believe that we are transforming along from a digital transformation perspective. So what I want to give you is, and I want to sort of pause here, open for any questions. And I leave this on screen because I want to give you a bit of a freebie for those of us that are on the call today. I want to open up the diagnostic to one team, of up to 15 people, depending upon the type of responses that we do get. If there are two teams that make up the 15, very happy to do that as well. But you'll get the full triangulation diagnostic around attitudes, behavior, and cognition. And you get a 60-minute findings debrief where I take you through the full-on diagnostic report. We'll get that to you within 2 weeks. And the only real condition is that an executive sponsor attends the debrief so that we get to showcase the power of the attitudes that their business have, the attitudes that your business has, aligned to how people are actually using AI at work. And then lastly, you might have educated a lot of your team members on Copilot, on AI, an introduction to artificial intelligence and so forth. But we still see a very low level of adoption when it comes to the rate of AI being used on either a regular basis, a daily basis, and so forth. So I'd like to give you this freebie as an opportunity to explore how AI is actually being used in your business, as opposed to just going on a hunch to say that we've trained people and therefore they must be using it. Or you're seeing an adoption level from a usage perspective per license but you're not seeing any real meaningful ROI, right? So I want to pause here. It's 7 minutes past 9. I'm going to open up for any questions that you might have, and then please go ahead, scan the QR code, and in a very colloquial manner, we can get lit. But Diane, go for it.
Devon, why are the top managers not using AI? Do you know?
Yes. Yeah. So there was some fear around the data that that Copilot was going to have access to, and whether that data, now that Copilot has access to it, whether that data would be shared on the open internet or on the open web if they were to prompt, receive a retrieve a response, and now that that data has been surfaced in the chat, is that now accessible across the open web? So that was one of it was actually the primary reason why those executives did not use it. Another reason why they didn't use it was because they simply didn't know how to get an effective response from Copilot. They didn't know that it could summarize, for instance, a board report into tangible action items that they could then use to convert into KPIs for their teams to deliver against. And they didn't know how to do it. They knew it could because they could see the Copilot sort of button in the ribbon, right, or in the bottom right-hand corner. Now that we see it, there's an icon that floats on top of Word. So they could see it there, but they didn't know how to go about using it. Another executive didn't know where Copilot was. So those are the three primary reasons why those three executives did not use Copilot at work. They were using ChatGPT, but for their personal tasks. But they weren't using Copilot for real work activities.
So, Devon, I want to just add another question to that. I mean, you've got your executive having fear that everything that gets done is going to go onto the internet, but they force their whole workforce to use it. I mean, how on earth does those two things come together? Because them not using it and the fear must. So what do they think the people are doing with it? If they don't, if they fear the impact of it.
Yeah, and there was something that I confronted in the workshop, because we had these executives were in the workshop with middle managers, with senior managers, with coordinators and specialists. So it was a very diverse group. One of the founding members actually joined me in the conversation, and she sat there and she told me that, for the first time, she was able to see people being very vulnerable, regardless of the occupational level. And I think that they've realized, the executives, they realize that, what, we're all in this sea of misinformation, and we're all in it together. One thing that they did, and this is what I spoke to the human capital practitioner about, the human capital, the CHRO about, was they were not allowed to use Copilot for any client-facing engagements. They were allowed to use Copilot for all internal activities, so summarizing emails or creating documentation that was to be distributed internally, and so forth. So the executives felt that would be, they were very comfortable with that level of usage, but not comfortable with usage that would result in any external facing documentation. I hope that gives you a better understanding, Diane.
Thank you.
Sorry, Charles. You're on mute, Charles. Oh, yeah, you're on mute.
Can't you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear you now?
Yeah. Lyndon, I share a mic, so We just need to coordinate amongst ourselves. So I think the whole thing that the use case that you're explaining here and the interaction that you had, to me, really smacks of, and I think Diane touched on it briefly as well, the irresponsibility of C-suite and directors in an organization to make that exact comment that you've just sketched out, that you have to use it. Okay, then you can't use it with a customer. You can only use it internally. What do you think happens with internal research that you do when you speak to a customer, that you forget about what you've learned internally and you're not going to then compromise the business going forward anyway? So I think the bigger issue to me, in my mind, is that, first of all, how well are organizations managing their document libraries? So who can access what documents in the organization? Because there's a very nuanced way of answering that third question. And my answer was true, and it came back and said incorrect to me. And I don't agree with that, because it didn't say if you gave it access to. So you can. So if I've got rights as an executive to access any document in the organization, and I go and I do a bit of research and all, but I don't understand the policies around finance, and I compromise things because now I'm a subject matter expert on finance because AI told me this, I'm going to compromise the business. So the accountability factor and the responsibility for C-suite is extremely severe. And it sounds like that organization needs an intervention at that level to get it right first, to understand how they're going to do it in their organization. And they seem to have a very knee-jerk, irresponsible way of addressing it, perhaps. So, yeah, I think the general work in the organization, in my experience, is happy to adopt, to experiment and understand. But there's a huge vacuum around the responsibilities and governance around how do I actually do that in a way that my organization wants it to. So it's kind of like there's no guidance given and no framework of how it should be done. And just to make a comment, you have to, but only for internal and not for external. It just sounds all muddled to me. So you've got a big job there.
Yeah. There are a few hands there. Yeah, so it is a big job, right? I think what's one of the things that we got off the boat, out the door very quickly, was we needed to establish AI policy.
Yeah.
And this was arguably, sorry for my poor use of a trackpad, that was the primary output that determined how we use AI. So the culture in the business has fundamentally shifted since then. Because the AI policy now provides a lot of guidance around how people can use. So they're using it for client-facing activities now, and they're using it across the entire Microsoft tenant, because permissions were given to various occupational levels to leverage the data. And we also, now that we've also embarked on the process design sessions, we're now seeing that if we were to give person X with information, so person X with insight from a sales perspective. Sorry, let me rephrase that. If we were to give someone in marketing, someone in sales, and someone in legal with access to the same data set, we sort of reduce those silos around, I don't have access to the right data in order to make decisions. Because the AI policy governs how we use data from a papaya perspective as well, we are able to then assign the right level of rights and permissions across the various occupational levels, so that I don't look at my data in isolation of the business in comparison to how someone else looks at the information. Instead, we are now able to incorporate multiple different layers of sort of data management to improve the richness of the output.
Yeah, I agree that will give them a better understanding, and they will get an ability to understand, but they're not the subject matter expert if they're marketing and they now have access to finance. So they need to understand they don't have the decision to make a judgment call, and they're not the subject matter expert. So the finance decision needs to be made. It must be the finance decision maker, not me now in marketing, because 100%. I've got access to the data. And I think that nuance sometimes is perhaps lost Sorry, Timber, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think, Devan, the first time you showed me this diagnostic, it blew my mind a little bit. And then I thought about it, and what you've actually done is reduced the FAFO percentage for organizations, right? And I'll qualify that. AI to this point or up until today has been a little bit like jumping in a river and then finding out whether it's cold or the current's flowing. What your diagnostic does is it quantifies the river and shows you that not all the currents are going to run the same. You're going to hit different levels of depth. And here is how you navigate, which is significantly different to, I guess, the general conversation out there. Is like, you just got to jump in and try this thing. And that's what most CIOs in the organization are doing. They know they have to be pro AI. So they are pro AI verbally and maybe even in their heads. But the direction they drive their organizations in actually is counter AI. So you find the business coming up with great use cases, and then the stumbling block becomes the very area that's supposed to enable this thing. And that's where you hear things around, okay, what does it do for privacy? What about our data? And the business is going, it's like when people come to HR with a question and HR asks a question back, and the person walks out the office going, but you should have the answer, not the question. I've got the question, you should have the answer. And the answer isn't a simple one. And I think that's what this diagnostic helps show. And the importance of having a key stakeholder, an executive sponsor, hear that in a language that they understand amongst their people is hugely powerful.
Yeah.
I think we had your hand is up next.
Sorry, Devan, is it me? Can I go?
Yes, it's you. Go for it.
Thank you. There's actually quite a lot that resonated from what you've shown. There's definitely a place for a diagnostic like this. Just one or two observations. I think most of the organizations have this one person who's got the vision and who can see the transformative power in time. But that middle management layer of or senior managers and middle managers who needs to lead and champion these initiatives in the different functions, they are not using it. As you say, I think that there is definitely a problem. The fact that it needs to be used also consistently across functions and not just only in one function. And I know sometimes there is a function that pioneer that, but many processes have cross-functional elements to it. So my experiences where they get stuck is the moment that they start with the process design and defining the process flow, the moment that it extends beyond the function, then there's not an appetite in the second function because people don't see the potential. So by using it, and I think it's basically the problem is twofold. By not using it across functions, I think you limit potential of what you can achieve. And then my experience in corporate is they shy to use consultants for process design. And in order to really get to that, you've got the four levels of leverage. If you want to get to that transformation benefit, you really need to do the process design first and to ask the questions. And people want to do it themselves in-house, and they get stuck, especially if there are cross-functional elements to a process to get to the true value. So my experience is they are not patient enough, and they're not getting it as part of the operational, they're not getting to it as part of the operational experience to define the process. So I think that element I really like. Of the fact that you say you structure it nicely. Sometimes people just want to go to say, but what can we transform? And it's easier actually to just buy the licenses in a pilot and see where it goes than to go through the discipline to define the process and go through it in a structured way. And you find that you've got one function that really champions it, and they get success, but limited success. And maybe that's part of the reality of corporates. I don't know what your experience are, if corporates are generally open for consultants to help them with that. But sometimes it's maybe good to start with one function who gets the rest excited, but it is definitely a disciplined process that does involve the process definition. And I find people are lazy almost to get stuck there. They want to rather experiment.
It's a lot of work, right? To invest time in analyzing a process, because, and also you don't see the rewards of that process engineering activity within 3 months. You see it, after 180 days at the minimum. So therefore, we have people that we actually just say, how can it assist us? Let's just sit in this assistance domain, even though we have an AI transformation strategy, linked to a digital transformation strategy. But we're missing these repeatable elements. We're missing the delegation elements. And I think something that we forget is that these steps are cumulative. You cannot skip a repeatable step and then automatically just assume, now I'm going to build an agent and delegate this task to it, because it's quick for me to do that. You do that, you miss the accountability step around all these high volume repeatable items of the vector of permutations within those repeatable items, and ultimately you end up in sort of hot water, if I can call it that, because you've delegated a task that you should not have delegated to an AI agent, and therefore you're blaming the technology, it's not working. Therefore your digital transformation strategy, your AI transformation strategy, fits into that 5% of companies that successfully achieve the outcomes of their DT plan, and you sit in the 95% of failures as opposed to the 5% of successes. I think McKinsey actually published that research, or it was Bain & Company, I can't remember. But thanks so much for that, Colin, I appreciate it. It's definitely, and I've spent the majority of my career has been spent in large enterprises, right, across financial services, banking, and retail, and so forth. Process engineering is tough. Organizations have teams that are permanently employed to engineer processes. Even those teams struggle to get buy-in from the business to allocate resources and make time available for their resources to work alongside their process engineers to optimize the existing processes. So it's by no means I'm saying that this is an easy task. The process activities, but the real value around how AI can influence work sits when we embed AI in the workflow. And if you really want to do that as part of your AI transformation strategy, and if that's part of your narrative in the business of embedding AI in the workflow, how can you not spend time in the process? So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Linda, and then Sonia.
Hey, so I think that, the more you work in this environment, and we're working in there quite a lot at the moment, the more you're seeing this is really a layered approach, and it's what I always call the quest. There is no endpoint. Yeah. It's not a journey. It's something that it unfolds every day. It's a quest as to how to improve yourself, and as you start improving, so does AI. So there's this level of steps that goes up. But I think the thing that's fascinating for me is just seeing how we're approaching it. And I'm not talking about this community, I'm just saying humans as such. And I think that's where the problem comes in. So I want to share a picture with you quickly and get some comments. So sorry, Devon, I'm going to just quickly. I want to know, can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Does anybody know what this is?
Those are the spoons my mom used to use for pumelus. What's a pumelu in English?
Grapefruits. So how many didn't know what it was straight away? And what it's used for? When you saw it, did you immediately know, okay, that's what it is and what it's used for? So 2 did, okay? So this is my point. This is AI. Look at cutlery as AI. But if you now want to take this teaspoon and decide to eat your yogurt with it, what do you think will happen to your mouth? Or if you take a fork and you decide, oh, I'll have some of this wonderful broth here and try and use the fork to scoop out the broth, what do you think will happen to it?
Dingle hopper.
Yeah, well, you can comb your hair with it, as Ariel will tell you. And so I think what's happening is this is where everybody always goes to. As it so happens, this is a shiny object, but everybody's just going to the shiny object. So there's a new product out now. It's called what, Buzz? We want it. We must have it. We must try it. And then there's another new product that's out, which is something else. We want it. We must have it. We must try it. And so what's happening? People are getting fatigue. They don't understand what it's about. And they all think, oh, this is a lot of rubbish. It's overrated. So for me, the thing that we need to look at is there are certain layers. If you're an organization that believes you want to improve yourself by using AI and not get left behind, there's a layer of making that decision. And what does that mean for your business? And that comes back to that age-old story where I'm always saying, start at first principles. Reimagine your business now that you have AI in your back pocket. That's the first thing. If you can see that there's a future for your business using AI, then you say, okay, fine. Then you call in Devon and you say, all right, Devon, listen, we need to understand where our people are sitting, because we know they've all used it in their personal capacity or however, but just what is their knowledge of it, and are they dangerous enthusiasts, or are they people who actually can make sense of this? So that's the next part in your quest, which is really to use a tool like what you've showed us, Devon, to understand where your people are with this. Yep. And then when you unpack that process, you can start saying, okay, well, some people need forks, some people need teaspoons, some people need serrated spoons, but nobody's doing that. They're starting with the teaspoons and the forks. They don't even know what they want to do with them. And that is why we're coming so badly unstuck with AI, and why I think so many organizations are getting frustrated and they're actually starting to say they don't want to use it anymore. So I think your tool is so useful, but it's got a place in it's got a definite place in the process. And I think that's what they're thinking. They can take one thing, whether it's an assessment or whether it's an AI tool or whatever, and I'll just take that one thing and then I'll implement that and then I'll have all my answers. And I think that's exactly what Karen and what Charles and what everybody is saying. If you've decided as an organization, this will make a difference to your organization and therefore you want to do it, okay, I think your starting point is then understanding where your people are at and how you're going to, what is the governance going to be around such a powerful tool? How are you going to manage that before you jump into finding whatever the shiny tool is? So thanks for listening to me. That was my main say for the day.
Sonia.
I just had a question, but I think maybe Linda answered it. Devon, I wanted to check with you, like when. So let's say, for example, and we can make it a smaller company, not a big one. They are kind of in the beginning of this process. When is the ideal time for a company to do this? Would it be when they've already kind of started dabbling, or right at the beginning when they decided we want to go for this, but we don't know how? Or, when is the ideal time to bring this in?
I think the ideal time is as soon as the conversations are taking place and budget needs to be spent or wants to be spent, or people are told that you need to. There's another organization that I've started conversations with where the L&D manager was told it's your KPI to ensure that you develop the capability of the business in the domain of artificial intelligence. And that conversation is mid financial year. That's when it took place. So I think it's important that the diagnostic takes or a tool of this nature, not necessarily, I'm not saying we must use this one, but a diagnostic that identifies where people actually are, as opposed to go on a hunch. to say we need AI literacy training for everybody in the business. I think that we need a diagnostic to really pinpoint where people are whenever that conversation takes place. And that could be at the beginning of a financial year. It could be midway through a financial year. It could be before we've spent any budget. It could be like after we've spent budget on educating people, right? The important thing is to identify where people are in their journey of leveraging AI so that we know how to then navigate what Linda was talking about, which is let's call it the mess or the chaos within the journey. So I hope that gives you better guidance there, Sonia, or gives everybody better guidance around when to sort of enter in that. Simba?
Thank you so much. And Linda, I thank you for the example that you gave, particularly the analogy of AI being different tools. And the question that I have, particularly with the use of AI broadly, is if you have, I think it's different loyalties that develop as people use AI. If you look at a company that would say we only use Copilot. Of course, Copilot is a good tool to use. However, there might be some capabilities that Copilot has, and then maybe Cloud does it differently or does it better because it is a specialist tool for that purpose. You've got a table knife, but you've got a stack knife. They are both nice, but one cuts sharper on different areas. So how then do you perhaps nudge IT into an attitude? I think it's probably an attitude adjustment where they are more open and willing to kind of accommodate different tools, and they won't just say we are only going to use Copilot. It's a bland object for everyone, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I think, Simba, you're 100% there. That process of thinking, well, only certain people can use Claude and other people must use something else. There are so many products out there. And I think back to what Karen was saying, you need to find people who actually know something about AI to guide you. And make the right decision for the right area in your business, or at least give you the options of what you can use so that you can make the right decision. Because if everybody in your business decided to use Claude and they wanted to all use Opus, well, then you're going to have a problem. So that's not a decision for them to take. You don't leave that for your people to take. You use the right tool for the right purpose, and the one that is affordable and form follows function type of environment. So thanks for your comments. I agree with you.
Yeah, Devan, you're 100% right, and Linda's right. I think the tool you've got is fantastic, and it just helps to raise the bar, so to speak, around having the conversation. And the best time to have the conversation is someone's ready to have the conversation.
Yeah.
So it's just to find them when they are there, and then to elevate it where it needs to be had. So by the organization talking amongst themselves gets the attention of C-suite, and then C-suite says, hey, we need to look at this properly now and sort this out. So I think your intervention is a brilliant one, and I just want to praise you for it and wish you all the best with it. And yeah, we need more Devons with
I agree.
approaches like this in the workplace to sort things out, because people are helpless, they're lossless, and this gives them the direction. So well done, kudos to you.
Yeah, it's
Cheers,
a
I
great
appreciate
product.
that.
And what we need to do is somehow map out a journey or a quest for some companies and say, this is where you plug in which part of it. And I think that will really be so useful, because then we can plug in this part, which I think will make a big difference.
Yeah.
Diane.
Sorry, Devon, I also want to, Linda, you made the comment of buzz. There's so many new things coming onto the market so fast at the moment that I think I'm sitting in my own space where I'm overwhelmed with choice. And it's going to become even worse, I think, in the future, that, the choice is just becoming so overwhelming. A company that has got a Microsoft license, as an example, and they've got Copilot, they already do have access within their tenant. Do you at that point, when you look at your process flow design and all of those kinds of things, and what kind of AI needs to come in, does one go and say, okay, but you've got Copilot, but actually Claude is better for this kind of workflow, and we're now going to duplicate, or we're going to whatever? Or do we just work with what it is that an organization has, like in Copilot? Would that not, I mean, for now, I'm talking about until, all the, I don't think the development's ever going to end, but we're in a crazy stage at the moment. And the other thing that's sort of sitting with me at the moment is that positioning the diagnostic as a strategic tool before decisions get made around anything else like that, for me, is a different positioning than having it as an AI literacy kind of diagnostic. So, if you could position this to say, before you make decisions around, what chaos you're going to bring into the organization, let's start with a diagnostic, and then obviously the conversation around the process re-engineering and all of those kinds of things will happen post the diagnostic. But getting it in as a strategic tool and not as a diagnostic tool, an AI literacy diagnostic tool, for me says that's maybe where it needs to be positioned and used for now, while we're in this chaos of all these different things happening.
Yeah. So if we go back to the first point around, there's so much development taking place in the land of generative AI, right? Microsoft essentially has access to Claude. They've got access to, you could switch between ChatGPT 5.6, I think it is, or 5.7. I've stopped following the various numbers. But then you can also go on to switch to Opus, and you can switch on Cowork as well. However, you need to change your billing cycle in order to gain access to Copilot Cowork. And that's where the sort of the budget comes in. But if you enable Cowork, it means that you're in that repeatability step, right? Because you want Cowork to perform actions and not act as an assistant. The problem is that people are using Cowork as an assistant as opposed to automating repeatable items, and without understanding where I can delegate this decision to, because I haven't really thought about how do I hold AI accountable, and who actually, we're in the process, who is accountable for step X, Y, or Z in the process. So all these things are sort of interconnected. On top of this, Microsoft is in conversation with DeepSeek to bring Kimi in, right? So you are good, and that's because of the cost of using Kimi is significantly cheaper than using the likes of Claude. So Microsoft, so then OpenAI reduces the cost of using its latest model so that it rivals DeepSeek, so that we don't have open weight large language models gaining access to enterprise-related data. So a lot is taking place at the moment regarding frontier models, open weight models, and so forth. But essentially, Microsoft is building out a orchestration layer, so you don't have to worry about the model in order to get work done. The orchestration layer switches based on the complexity of the task that you're looking to achieve. So there's a lot that is currently taking place that's going to solve for that first point around which large language model do we use. I'm not even talking about Claude Code, because Claude Code is significantly impressive, right? But in 6 months time, another large language model that has a dedicated coding capability might rival that. I don't know, because I'm not that close to the coding elements of the large language models, right?
But yeah, in that case, the work that we can do now that actually makes real sense is to do the diagnostics, to get organizations to understand what needs to be put in place. And maybe I like the idea, because when I used to do my HIV work, the first thing I sold was a policy. Because once the policy is in place and the diagnostic is done, then organizations start feeling comfortable that they can navigate whatever craziness is happening on the outside, because they've got the architecture in place almost. So is that not are those not the two places that Linda, I'm thinking about our conversation the other day, is that not the place where we need to start, advocating around the role that the catalyst, for instance, can play, is around the diagnostics and the policy, and then start getting people in the conversation around that.
Yeah, I think so.
Just a question, because it's a good place to start, because everything else is so crazy at the moment. If I'm a leader of an organization, that's the kind of logic that I would want to follow. To get to the space of, then you can decide which tools you want to do, but all the other architecture is in place.
Yeah, I think what you were touching on there in closing, Devon, I think is 100% right. Everyone is so worried about the biggest, greatest, bestest model, and they think they need to do that to even write an email. I mean, the amount of additional work that I can get done in a day without ever coming near my cap limit for the week, the day, or whatever, by just using the appropriate model for the task at hand is amazing. So it's kind of like you're expecting to use a surgeon to diagnose a cold, if I can put it in medical terms. You don't need that. So having Kimi in place and all the rest, I think, is brilliant. So I think what Microsoft has done well in the past and will probably continue to do is they understand how to protect an enterprise and how to make sure that the permission-based access to their company data is managed responsibly and correctly. Then it doesn't matter what model you're using or what agent you're using to do what needs to get done. The capability is there, and they've proven it with the benchmark. So like I said in our last discussion, I think it was that now everyone has got uncapped access for data. You're going to have uncapped access for inference one day, in my opinion. It's going to happen. And you're going to just need to use the appropriate one for whatever. So one of the reference Buzz, what's so exciting about Buzz is I was one of those crazy YouTubers that bought 20 iMac minis when they came out and basically built my own inference capability using an open source or open weight model. I can now share that inference with people in my community, and they don't have to pay any tokens whatsoever. So I think we're going to get there. I think it's going to happen. But it's the bigger conversation is about embracing how we use it, how we work. As I don't believe AI is going to change the way that I do my work. I'm going to change the way that I do my work. And the decision makers in an organization are going to change the way that we do our work. It's just about now picking up the Diggle hopper, the fork, and understanding what that's used for, or the great teaspoon that Linda was talking about, and understand what that's used for, and understand that, you can eat yogurt with a fork, but it's going to be so much easier to eat it with a tablespoon, depending on what your consumption preferences are in terms of the way you eat. So, so it's really up to you as an individual. But the capability, AI is extremely capable, and it's about just working out how to use it the most responsible way that safeguards me as an individual and my organization that I work for. So keep going, Devon. You're on the right track, and it's so cool.
I agree with that. I think Diane's also got a point in saying that this is something that, as the Catalyst Collective, we can actually help create that roadmap, that quest roadmap that people can go on. And so what I wanted to suggest, and I see, Devon, you're saying, maybe, I think what we need to do is, I think for our next inspiration session, it might be useful to start making sure people understand the new terminology. So Buzz, as Charles mentioned, is a harness, and that seems to be the new frontier of AI. So what is a harness for those who don't understand, and how's that going to be used? And so I think, and token economics, what does that mean? It's what we started touching on today, because once so you've got to kind of start at the end. When you start talking about harnesses and token economics, you start seeing, oh my God, I've started with a whole wrong process. Now I've got, because, people's patience is not endless. You kind of like start with this thing and then you switch and then you switch and then you switch. And eventually people just give up because it's just all too much. And if you actually knew what you were going to do right from the beginning is maybe, and also if we knew that harnesses is the new frontier and you need to get a harness that suits your industry or your environment, maybe you'd make the right decisions up front without taking the whole business and dragging them through this bush backwards. So I think that's a nice discussion to have for our next inspiration session.
Absolutely.
I think that would be a good one. Yeah, so we've kind of run out of time, guys. It was a really interesting conversation today.
Nice. Thank you, Devon.
Thanks, Devon.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys.
I'm just waiting for Temba's comment to come through on the chat window because they're always so interesting, Tim.
No, he's already done it. You missed it.
I haven't seen
In
it.
the Highlander voice. There's only one.
Oh, okay. That was the earliest one. He's busy typing again. According to the chat window, he's busy typing again. Just tell us, Temba.
Just come off mute, mate.
Yeah. It's not always the same, though. Yes. That's nice. Thanks.
I was saying I gotta go put on my latex suit.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. Thanks a lot. I hope you guys
Thank you so much,
in Joburg. We're happy here.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye. Bye.
Ciao, everyone. Bye.
Good. Bye.